Welcome back to the Growth Department. Today's guest isn't just talking the talk about lean growth, he's helping companies all over the world build it. After two B2B exits using the old playbook, he's taking a new approach to growth. He's now scaling Swan to 10 million ARR per human employee with just 3 founders and a fleet of AI agents. Welcome to the Growth Department, Amos.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. I love it how you emphasized human employees. You're already getting part of the philosophy. That's important.
There are differences. There are now robot people, robot employees.
We don't believe that. We think that there's not going to be robot employees, but we're going to open that in this conversation, I hope, Chelsea.
That's why we're here. So you've lived the dream that a lot of people who work in tech startups don't get to. You've had 2 exits. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. The dream doesn't look like from within how it looks like from the outside. And the reason why I founded Swan is actually because I fed up from the unicorn playbook, the old growth at all cost model.
What is this growth at all cost model and why is it dead?
Yeah, so in my 2 previous companies, it was all about the investors and the playbook that they dictated. And that was the growth at all cost model where you raise a big funding round before you even know who you're selling to and what you're selling. And then you get to 30, 40 people before you even got to your first $1 million in revenue. Then from round to round, you kind of like scale your total addressable market and division rather than the real metrics that impact the business. Sooner or later, you realize that you've built your entire company on a sick foundation. It's hard to maneuver. It's hard to innovate, in that your primary customers are your investors, basically. And that's who you're working for and what you care about. And I realized that this playbook wasn't for me. When I came to build Swan, my 3rd company and the one that I'm actually right now involved in, is that I realized that it's time to change how we scale companies. And if you look at technology progression, wow, there's AI agents. So this is the time to reinvent the playbook. It hasn't been reinvented since 2009 when Eric Rice coined, the lean startup and told everyone they should start building MVPs. And since then, we're still building these MVPs. And, once in a while, someone says, it's not about minimum viable product, it's minimum lovable product. Oh, wow, that's such an innovation. Except, well, we're still stuck in the old paradigm. And Swan is really here to try to reinvent the scaling model. How do you scale in an AI native world? We call this model the autonomous business model, basically. And it's a business that is designed to scale with intelligence, not with headcount. And not with a lot of capital, actually. And we're going to open this down in this conversation, Chelsea, right?
For sure. We're diving right in. Was there an aha moment after the 2 exits where you're like, or even while you were working there, where you realized we can do it differently now? It doesn't need to be this way.
Yeah. So I felt like the real unlock came with the technology. So the fact that AI agents came into the world in the last 2 years really changed everything. But I've noticed the problems and the challenges in the old model. Every company goes through that. You have an understanding of your ICP, of what you're trying to sell to. And then there's like a new insight that you came through. Maybe, a technical insight that it can't be done from this perspective, or the buyer doesn't really care about X, they really care about Y. Just a natural progression of a company. And then you need to just divert the ship to a different direction. And then you start making work for people, just to make sure that they're on par with everything. And you start to understand how bloated your company is. It's not built for these maneuvers, basically. You've built this company like you think the first assumption is the right assumption and it's just about scaling. But it's not about that. It's about innovation. And so it was obvious to me this is not the model, but I didn't have the answer yet back then. And now when I've started playing with all these agentic solutions, I realized that, this is time to actually reinvent how we scale. And now you can scale really with intelligence, not with headcount. And what we did is we turned Swan into an autonomous business. Basically, we're not chasing valuation inflation. What we're chasing is revenue per employee, revenue per human employee, like you emphasized at the beginning of the show, Chelsea. And we're on a mission to get to $10 million ARR per employee by turning each person on the team into their 100 of themselves. So it's not by hiring more AI employees or robot employees. It's actually by figuring out what's the zone of genius of each employee within the company, their section, their area where their skills and passion intersect to create disproportionate value to the company. And what we're trying to do is take AI agents to amplify what's within the zone of genius and automate what's outside.
You know what's really cool is your company is living what you're doing. So sometimes I've worked with agencies that are helping other companies scale, but inside the agency is an absolute hot mess. Like there's no process. There's everything's like they're adding headcount. They don't know how to do it, what they're doing for their clients, but what Swan does, you're living. Can you explain like what Swan does just so everyone
Yeah.
gets it?
Um, Swan is like Lovable, but for GTM. It's an AI go to market engineer that works with sales and marketing to turn any go to market process into an agentic workflow in seconds from prompt to pipeline. So you could scale that process with intelligence, not with headcount. What it does basically is it learns from all of our best practices, how we're scaling our GTM. I'm a one person go to market department. We have more than 200 customers and I generate millions of dollars in pipeline on my own using Swan. So we take these learnings and we have this flywheel where we embed these learnings into an engineer and coding agent that is dedicated for non-technical go-to-market operators to help them adopt this agentic mindset and go through this transformation so they could scale their demand and revenue with intelligence, not with headcount.
I'm going to skip ahead a few questions because I already feel overwhelmed. I know it's the future. I like to think I'm a smart cookie, but let's take the podcast, for example. I have the processes mapped out. So I know what needs to be done every step to get a podcast recorded to released and marketed. But I am so busy, I don't know where to find the time or how to get started with putting AI into the process versus just going on Upwork and saying, all right, come help me. Here's what you need to do. Come help me. What advice do you give to a founder who's at that stage where like, I know I need to do it, but how do I start?
Yeah. This is a great example. It actually encompasses everything. So we're going to take that, Chelsea, and just focus on that. Okay. So we're going to focus on you, but founders, if you're listening, or anyone who's trying to implement AI in their company, it applies to you as well. Chelsea, you already know the process. You mapped it out. You did 90% of the job. Okay. What people don't understand is that, first it comes from internal introspect, not external. You don't look at the outside and look which type of agents could help solve my biggest challenges. You just, first of all, you map your processes, identify the bottlenecks, and then you need to just formulate a hypothesis of like, okay, where are the areas that I could actually move the needle? And you did that, Chelsea. And then just the solution, you said, I'm going to Upwork and I'm going to share all of that context with a human being that would just take care of all that execution for me. What is happening right now with AI and specifically with coding agents, and Swan is a coding agent for go-to-market, and we can talk about that a separate discussion. We think that all of agents are becoming coding agents. What is happening basically is that the execution is being done by the AI. And you don't need to really understand the fundamentals here about how to operate the large language model or how to connect it to different tools, etc. If you even go to Claude right now, you can just connect it to HubSpot or connect it to Stripe, etc. Just a connector. It's 1-2 clicks. All is left in this world is just context. It's just sharing the context with the AI, specifying the work, and reviewing the output. These are the three fundamental skills. 1, introspect, map the process, understand the bottlenecks. That's number 1. 2, specify it to the AI. Watch it does its magic. See its output. It would probably not be 100% accurate. You'll need to review it. Review the output. If you have a good understanding of what a good output should look like, you can tell it. This is not good. I expect Y, not X. Specify, review, few feedback loops, and you're there.
That made it seem pretty easy. So the first step, I've seen a bunch of companies skip that first step and just say, we need AI. We're going to need AI this year, and try to slap something onto a sales team that has no process isn't even using our CRM. Do you see that still happening?
Yeah, so there are two fundamental reasons why over 90% of implementations fail, AI implementations in GTM. The first one is if you bolt AI on top of chaotic system, it would just increase the chaos. If you don't have established processes, if your data is messy, AI wouldn't save you. It would just amplify that chaos. And that is number one reason. The second is that people optimize for perfection, not for adaptation. What does that mean? Um, if you take back the analogy from the startup world, where I thought that my first assumption was the right assumption, and then I just jumped into scaling, right? I skipped the iteration phase. People do the same thing with AI. They think, or maybe they don't even think, but that's how they operate. They say, okay, this is what should happen. Let's do it. And they do it. It doesn't work. They're starting from zero again. Or they just abandon the project, or they blame the vendor, or the technology is not there yet, right? But it's not about that. You're entering like an uncharted territory. There's a lot of unknown unknowns. One, how does the technology behave? Two, how does it adapt to your processes specifically? And three, how would the humans in the process will react to that? Those are three variables that is hard to calculate. And so you need to build a system that is optimized for adaptation, for feedback loops. And if you design the entire project from the beginning to say, yeah, we're going to just put something out there, and then we're going to review the output and then specify again and review the output, then you'll get to a working product very, very fast and working AI implementation very fast. And so the 10% of AI implementations that are successful are the ones that have a good understanding of the processes and challenges, and they have the right hypothesis at the beginning of the area. They just don't know how the solution would look like. And now they have this process of specifying something, implementing it, reviewing the output, and having this feedback loop of improving it over and over until they get to the right point.
So taking your time slowly at first and expecting it to be maybe a little bumpy, not expecting a magic button that your whole company is going to be automated. Okay. So you've got 3 people on your team. What's that like running a tiny team where everyone has their area of genius?
Yeah. So at Swan, we're just 3 people, building the first autonomous business. And when we set out to build Swan, we put a constraint. We say we're not going to throw bodies at every scaling challenge that we have. We have everything that we need at the company. Basically, we have Neve, my co-founder, who were with me in my 2 previous companies. He's the CTO. Then we have Ido as well. We've known each other for 10 years. Built in the last company, he's been with me. He's the chief product officer, and I'm in charge of growth. So we have like technology, product, and growth. Right. That's all you need, just to take a company from 0 to 1 and 1 to 10. And we just set out to build a company like that. And in 2025, we grew from 0 to over 200 customers. We're scaling fast. These are businesses. It's not like we're doing a prosumer. It's not like Instagram or WhatsApp or Lovable in terms of like selling to prosumers or consumers. These are real businesses, annual contracts, supports, SLA. And it's amazing to see how much you can get out of a person if you just flip the equation. The traditional business model and the scaling model, we call it cog culture, where the employees are just cogs in the wheel, and they are designed to scale the business. There's a job description. This is your area and scope. This is what you should do. And your job is to scale the business. And then any employee afterwards gets diminishing returns of value to the company, right? Because it just gets slower and slower. When you flip that model, an autonomous business tries to scale its own employees. So the system is designed to scale its employees, not the employee is designed to scale the system. And so it enables the team to try and aspire to spend as much as time as possible within their zone of genius. So it's not like we're religious about that, and you'll never do something that deflates you, right? But what we're trying to do is like we identify if I'm spending time on area. So for example, we have inbound requests. And some of them are unqualified. And I spend time on unqualified leads. This is outside of my zone of genius. So amazing. I talked to Ido. We work with Swan, and it takes us, 30 minutes to just have Swan take care of that process of unqualified leads and then just surfacing up only the high quality qualified leads to me, basically. And you can look at every process within our go-to-market system that we've built. We're always asking ourselves, what should I do? Where should I focus? Where the human resources should go to? And then we think about what the AI should take care of afterwards, basically. So the human comes first, the AI comes second. And that philosophy always makes sure that we're not abandoning our customers. We're not building walls between us. We're building bridges.
What's the biggest surprise that you've had so far since launching?
Wow. I had so much, I think, so much. I think that, when we set out, I wasn't sure that really you can scale with intelligence, not with headcount. And I think what I've seen is that when you build this system around a person and they spend their time within their zone of genius, there isn't really a glass ceiling to how much leverage you could create around them. And I think that what we're getting to is that we're just breaking this glass ceiling each time over and over again. And I think, the biggest area that surprised me the most is just software. How fast, the software development velocity. So Neve is a single developer. He has a lot of experience. He built multiple products from 0 to 1 and scaled them. He's not your average developer, far from it, but he's just one person. And he does architected and built a system that serves over 200 businesses in production and can be competitive in a market that is saturated if you look at it. So it's not like we've went to a niche that there isn't a lot of software solutions. This is GTM, basically. There's thousands and thousands of competitors out there. And so a single person software engineering team could compete with these players and actually deliver amazing value to them through software. So that is something that, even we set out to build Swan like that, I didn't realize that it could actually become something like that. It's amazing.
You mean you're a founder, you hang out in like the founder zones. Are there other companies you're seeing having as much success with small teams these days?
Yeah. So I think that every startup founder today understand that the landscape has changed. They can't grow to 50 people like they did before. There's a lot of pressure on efficiency, a lot of pressure on using AI. So it's in every conversation it can appear. I think the difference is that there are people who know how to actually do it, and maybe not know, but they have a good taste and a good intuition about like how to think about it, how to apply it. And then there's just people who just feel like we need to add AI to this process, right? And you can really feel that difference if someone is actually talking about the process, talking about like an introspection first, or if it's like coming from outside first.
That's the 90% that are going to have trouble.
Exactly.
When you're thinking about your own team or which your customers will need, where do you draw the line with things that need to be handled by a human employee and what should be handled by AI?
Yeah. So our philosophy around it is centered around the human. So you ask yourself, it's similar to how you're building a software product, actually. So when you're building a software product, you always ask yourself when you have like these build versus buy analogy, dilemmas. You always ask yourself, like, what should you build? What should you buy, right? When you're building a software product. And eventually it comes down to like your core IP, like your core advantage. That's what you should focus on. What separates you from the herd? And we believe that the same thing applies to implementing AI in a business environment. So you should ask yourself, what is your, like, how do your talent stack looks like? What is your advantage? How does that DNA looks like? And I'll give you an example. So if you have like a strong cold calling culture, that's part of your IP. That's part of your DNA. That's what you're good at. And so if you used AI to automate your cold calling initiatives completely, then you're lost your competitive advantage there, right? You're going to be like everyone else.
Hmm.
And so when you ask yourself, where should I put AI and where should I put my humans here? So you should ask first, okay, what my humans are good at. They're good at cold calling. They should do that. They should spend as much as time on the phone as they can. Let's have AI surround them by all the context they need and just enable them to focus on being on the phone all day, right? But if you look at Swan, for example, my superpower is social selling on LinkedIn. I love writing content, writing posts. People interact with that. And that's how we generate our entire pipeline throughout the content that I share on LinkedIn. And so if I would automate the entire content creation process to AI, then we would lose our competitive advantage. And so for me, it would actually make more sense to have, cold calling automation, right? Rather than, LinkedIn social selling automation. And for another team, it will be vice versa. And so the biggest lesson here is that to understand where to implement AI is you actually need to start from your humans and what they're good at and where you want them to focus on. And then you can think where you should put AI.
I like that you're still doing your own social posts. Thank you. Appreciate it. It makes the reading better.
I will never stop doing it, I hope.
There are ways though that you put a post about how you can use AI to help your social selling amplify. So the things you're really good at, make it more, right? Like you can still leverage it in your area of genius.
Exactly. So when you're thinking about humans and AI and how they work together, so if we go back to the analogy of the zone of genius, like what's our DNA, where are we good at? So if it's cold calling, it's not like we're not going to use AI for cold calling. It's just that's what we want our humans to do. So how can AI support them? If it's outside of the zone of genius, how could AI automate the work so they're not spending time on the mundane, on the non-strategic, right? So for me, I use AI a lot in my content creation process, but I use it as thought extension, right? Not as replacement. And I try to amplify my thinking process and the output by using AI, not just posting more frequently just by letting the AI do it.
How do you think about brand, customer trust, human connection when your team is really tiny?
So I believe that in an AI native world, brand becomes one of the most important moats out there. Customer relationship, customer perception is, the extension of your brand, basically, and it becomes the differentiator. And if you look at ChatGPT and Anthropic, like OpenAI and Anthropic, ChatGPT and Claude, for example. A lot of people would say Claude has a better model. ChatGPT, they have a better model. What separates them? For the average consumer, they don't really know. It's actually a branding question. And ChatGPT is an amazing consumer brand. They won the hearts of hundreds of millions of consumers. Anthropic is doubling down on developers. Anthropic is loved by developers so much. And they're an amazing brand for developers. And we're actually using Anthropic, Claude for all of our product internally, and that's where all of the money goes to. But my mother, my father, they all use ChatGPT. That's of course they won't use a different AI because they feel comfortable with that. But then if you look at Gemini, Google's AI, they have a complete different branding. They feel like if I trust Google with all my personal information, and if I'm in the Google ecosystem, I would go with Gemini, right? It's not like it's a more powerful model. It's not about that, right? So in an AI native world where every application can do so much, and it's really hard for the end user to understand what's better for me, and then branding, positioning, customer relationship becomes one of the biggest differentiators. And I think and I hope that's the reality that relatively to our size and to our stage, we are one of the highest spenders on brand in the world from, relatively to, how big we are.
We interviewed Anthony Kanata, who was the CMO of Gainsight, about building a category. And he says brand is the final moat. You just said the same thing. So listen up, everybody. What's been the hardest part about operating a lean team?
The hardest thing about building an autonomous business is redundancy. There's a direct correlation between the size of the leverage that you're trying to give to an employee at the company and your ability to cover for them in absence, right? When they're not there. So the more leverage they get, basically, it means that they have more responsibility that just, you don't have overlaps. It's not like five people doing the same job. It's just one person who's in charge for the entire go-to-market operations. And then there's one person who's in charge for all of our product roadmap and how do we think about products. And then there's another person who is actually in charge of the technology and the architecture and the bugs, etc. And so if Neve is sick, no one could fix bugs in a software product, right? That's crazy. And so I feel like the biggest challenge and the biggest threat to the autonomous business model is redundancy. And we are thinking a lot about it. And one of our motivations to grow beyond just a 3-person team to be like 5 or 6 is redundancy. So if you have 2 developers, not one, if you have 2, then you have a solution for the redundancy issue, right? Because if someone just sick or something, you have another developer. And there's like an infinite times change between having 1 developer and 2 developers in that sense, right? So the more leverage you give your employees, the more you need to think about redundancy in that sense.
Then you can take a vacation, man.
Yeah, oof, I wish.
I saw one of your recent AI bills, so I'm guessing the Claude bill on your LinkedIn. Is the cost nuts and ends up being as expensive as if you had people doing all of those tasks, or is it still not even close?
People should understand that the mindset is, it's not about if every task, if I had AI doing it or a human doing it, what would be better? I think it's just changing, first of all, the mindset about creating leverage, right? So sometimes, first of all, you can miss. Maybe you're not using AI in the right way and you're overspending. It could happen, and it could happen to us as well. I'm not saying that every initiative that we're using AI for is the most efficient, and I can definitely see some areas where they're lacking optimization. But first of all, it's about that mindset. Because if you have the foundations for an AI native operation, then you can scale it. So maybe there are some processes that you're missing out, but it's different. And you need to think about that when you're building an autonomous business. If you assume that we're still in the start of the AI revolution, not at the end of it, then every progression the AI make, then the autonomous business benefits from it. Right. Because if your entire operations are built on AI, so you talked about costs. So there's a very reasonable assumption that costs will go down over time, right? Maybe right now it's not the most efficient decision to make, but maybe in a year it will be. Same thing goes with performance. You can say maybe Swan also knows how to do customer support for us as well and performing a lot of these tasks. And sometimes it's not optimal. There are some situations where there's a human in the loop needed, or it's spending a lot of resources just to get to the conclusion, and the conclusion isn't that accurate as we wanted to. But every month there's a new model out there, and every model that gets out there, our support gets better, our onboarding gets better, our R&D gets better, our sales gets better, everything gets better. And so if you're building on top of AI, our assumption is that the more you build on it, the more you're enjoying this wave and the more it compounds. And so we spent last month $50,000 on AI, which is a lot, but this is a bet for the long term, not for short-term gains.
Really different. How do you feel about, this is not really on topic with scaling a business, but how do you feel about the environment and AI?
I'm rooting for Elon in that sense. Elon is trying to take us out to space. It's troubling because we are building AI factories. That's how NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang says, and I agree with that point of view. AI factories, it means that we need energy. On top of energy, we need data centers. On top of data centers, we need GPUs, basically the processors. On top of that, we need the models. And then on top of that, we have the applications. And so all of that factories are now being built all across the planet. And it is concerning the amount of capital that is flowing there. Part of it is the economic potential. Part of it is kind of like a Cold War between US and China, right? It's like a defensive or offensive tactics. So there's a lot of different hidden motivations there. The risk for the planet exists, definitely. Elon is going to take us to space to actually build data centers in space to be able to produce the energy, the data centers, and the GPUs. The entire factory will live outside of the planet. And so I'm a big believer in that. And Elon has been known for making his dreams come true. So I'm rooting for that.
I like this story. He's not my favorite human, but I do like this. This is a good idea. Or put it on like the poles. Although there's probably not enough sun if they needed it to be solar powered, but it's
No,
cold.
but the problem with poll is that the ice will melt and it will flood the ocean. So that's a huge problem, actually. Not a good idea, Chelsea.
This is why I'm not in charge of it.
Yeah, we're going to put Elon in charge of that specifically. I'm a big believer in him in that regard.
I'll stick to my zone of excellence. Oh my gosh. Okay. So we ask every guest a few questions at the end. We'll put some link to how people can watch Swan in action in all your socials. What's one book, podcast, or show that you're loving lately?
That's a good question. So I listen a lot to Lex Friedman. It's not something new. And Dwarkesh as well. So maybe I think that's more interesting. He had an episode with Ilya Sustover, the founder of SSI, Safe Superintelligence, who was the previous co-founder of OpenAI. Ilya shared there in that episode, so I do recommend listening to that episode. It's an amazing episode about AI from a perspective of one of the most renowned researchers in the world, perhaps. Ilya tries to keep it non-technical, but talks about, the threats of AI to the world and the relationship between humans and AI and what's the difference between us and them and from the point of view of a researcher who's really in the weeds. And what I've liked the most out of it is that Ilya coined something that really struck with me is that he called it taste. And he said that a researcher that could be better than an AI researcher is a researcher that has good taste. What does it mean? I was like, okay, researcher with a good taste. I was surprised about that point of view. And he said that you look at Einstein, if you look at the biggest leaps in the world of human cognition, they came from people who had good taste. They knew what to ask, not only to prove it and to show it. They had this intuition about like a direction to go to. It's not like they brute forced everything and came to this realization. And I think that a good researcher has good taste. They know where to look first and knows which questions to ask. And I think it applies to a lot of different areas where people are going to fight with AI over the profession. So if you look at developers as well, developers are starting to fight with AI about who's in charge of the code here, who's doing all the work. And what you're seeing is that the developers that rise above the noise are the ones that have good taste to it. They know something that the AI couldn't really unlock just from all this training data. And I love that analogy of just thinking about what's your taste. It's kind of like maybe goes back to your zone of genius. What is that something that is uniquely yours, that you have your point of view, your intuition, your ability to just see the world in a way that no one else, or maybe most of people, can't really see. And the more AI proliferates and embedded in our society, then the more this point of view will be important and uniquely yours and what will separate you from everyone else.
Okay, I'm going to write that down. I'll listen to that. What's one thing that you are looking forward to learning or trying this year?
Yeah, so I have an hypothesis that we can create a new type of community for humans and AI together. Okay. I call it a collective intelligence. I'm hoping of proving it could actually work. I'm going to learn a lot about this area. And the first thing that we actually saw is Moldbook. Did you hear about like social media for agents that exploded and like on Twitter? So someone built like a social media for agents, kind of like Reddit, and agents started publishing into it posts and people reacted to it, etc. And for me, it was kind of like the first manifestation of a social interaction that is real between humans and agents. Doesn't matter if the agents, they have consciousness, they don't have consciousness. It's real, it's fake. It doesn't matter. It was kind of like a new space where we could actually interact with agentic content, agentic entertainment that, had real agency to it, right? The agents had agency. They came, they posted something, and you could look at it and think, what does that what does that make me feel? Like, what do I think about that? Right. And I think we're on the cusp of something here. And I want to actually create that for B2B go to market. And you're going to see very interesting experiments from Swan this year about creating environments where agents could share information with each other about go to market. Humans could participate as observers, maybe could chime in somehow, but basically there will be some interaction there. And we're hoping that that entire space and the interaction within it will allow people to learn and to grow out of that and become better GTM professionals.
That sounds like a really fun learning project for the year. A little bit more intense than knitting. If you could leave us with like a nugget of hope, I know I said some gloom and doom things about the environment, a nugget of hope or what you're excited about for Swan and for AI in general.
Yeah. So the more we go deep into the AI rabbit hole, the clearer it gets that there are two camps right now in AI, and one is losing and the other one is winning. And it gives us hope. Okay. And I'll explain why. The first camp, it was the first wave of AI startups. They looked at humans' jobs and they say, we're going to build AI that is going to replace them. So an SDR, it's a difficult job to maintain, et cetera. So we're going to build like an AI SDR. And people have initially said, wow, yeah, it could work for the industry, right? But none of the AI SDRs really made it, right? And all of them are pivoting or shutting down, et cetera. We're seeing the same things. People said like AI CMO or an AI lawyer or an AI support even. It's not really kicking off. We saw Klarna, who is a public company, they replaced their entire support agents with AI support agents and they reverted back to human assisted. And the second wave of AI startups, which were kind of like leading the charge on it, is saying something different basically. Is if you reimagine how humans could leverage AI to scale themselves, to create better version of themselves, then that's where you can really have a huge unlock. And moreover, if you look at AI and try to use it to just reduce the production costs of something, not replace it, just reduce the production costs of something, then that's how you can find huge unlocks. And if you look at coding, the first real application, all of these companies, they have seat-based pricing models. They actually charge seat-based. They charge per the human operator out there, right? It's because AI is just collapsing the cost of software production to zero, but there's still a person behind this with the wheel who's just telling it what to build, etc. And we're doing the same thing for go-to-market. We're taking a coding agent. We're collapsing the cost of GTM engineering, basically, so you don't need to spend time, resources, learnings, and people on the actual manufacturing, assembly, configuration of all these different pieces in your tech stack. Now you can just say it and it will happen. So what we're doing, we're collapsing the production costs of GTM engineering so you can just execute on your ideas, but it's your ideas. It's not the AI. And so the second wave is starting to find gold by actually focusing on the human, not by replacing it.
I love that. That is a hopeful little nugget to end it. Thank you. I appreciate you joining us. That's a wrap for this episode. We're going to link below everywhere you can find Amos and his team. And yeah, thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me.